Hi, it's Peter Chapman, and welcome to another SKUFood Recipes for Success. We're excited this week to start a new series in July where we're going to delve into how to help you tell your story better. And this is a great theme, which I think a lot of food and beverage companies can really benefit from. So I'm really looking forward to our 4 weeks of telling your story. And our recipes for success are an opportunity for those of us at SKU Food here to give back a little bit. It's been a challenging year. It's hard to believe we're more than halfway through 2020 already. And the first half for some is, or for many, has been a real challenge. And our recipes for success have been our way to try to give back and help people in the food industry, to share some insights, to help you understand how to deal with some of the challenges that this whole COVID-19 has brought on. And now as a lot of things are starting to open up and we're seeing some changes in the marketplace, we have to start to look forward and start to say, okay, how do we work the best that we can in the back half? Some food producers and processors are way up in volume, others have been struggling. So how do we try to get things back on track and see what happens in the marketplace as things do begin to open up, and hopefully we can continue on that positive trend towards getting things back to some form of normal. I mean, there's no doubt the shopping environment will have changed until there's some sort of a solution to COVID-19. But consumers are going out to stores more and really trying to return to some of the things that they like to do. So we'll try to help you manage through some of that. And my name's Peter Chapman, and I've had the privilege of working in the food industry for a number of years. We'll leave it at that. And my career started in a store where I worked during high school and university days, and then joined Loblaw companies for 19 years, worked in different parts of that business. And really what I try to do with SKU Food is to help producers and processors by using my experience inside a major retailer. And I know how they think, I know how they make decisions, why they make decisions, and try to help people understand that. And the one of the premises that we talk a lot about at SKU Food is that it's not just about making great products to sell, it's about selling those great products you make. And unfortunately, we see so many great products that don't maximize their potential because people just don't put the right focus on the selling part. And I'm not trying to diminish how challenging it is to produce great food and beverage products, but you also have to be able to do a great job selling them, because there are a lot of them out there, and we know that there's a lot of competition. So we have to make sure we do a great job selling. And our recipes for success are meant to be interactive. So if you've got a question or a comment, I really encourage you to put it in there. And I will take a break a few times during the session today to address those questions, because the purpose of these is to help you and help your business. So I do the best I can to put the content together in terms of what I believe is relevant, but I want to make sure they're relevant for you. So if you've got a question or a comment, then just type it into the Q&A section there, and I will definitely refer to them, and we will definitely address them all while we're here today together. And one of the things for me that's fantastic is that our SKU Food Recipes for Success are presented by FCC. And FCC is the only Canadian lender that's 100% invested in Canadian agriculture and food. And I'm sure many of you know FCC through their relationship with agriculture, but they support the entire ecosystem that surrounds that. And it's important to share that, you know, they finance food processors, manufacturers, wholesale and distribution companies. They also finance equipment and packaging suppliers. So they work with companies throughout the food industry and at every stage of the life cycle, right from artisanal producers and processors right up to large multinational companies who are exporting. So they really do work with everybody. And financing options include assistance with cash flow, equipment, inventory financing, expansion and construction, real property startup, and diversification, and so much more. So if your food business is looking to grow or change, then I encourage you to give the folks at FCC a call, and I'm sure that they'd be happy to have a conversation with you about some of the many services and products that they offer to our food industry. And one of the things, as we've been talking about what our recipes for success should deliver, this whole concept of telling your story really is one that has resonated with me. And I think it's a great opportunity for food and beverage processors to really change, because a lot of what I see is people just talking about features. And I understand that you work hard on innovative processes, or ingredients are important, or those kind of things, that the features of your product are great, but it's really not why people buy. People buy because of the benefits. And so we're going to focus on that in our series on telling your story. But before we get to that, we have to start at the beginning. And if you've been with us through May and June, we had a great series in May where we had Carolyn from Duckish, and she talked a lot about online selling and the that component of her business, Duckish. But one thing she said every week was, to be successful with that online selling, you really have to understand your target market. You have to know, who are you trying to communicate with, and it should also determine how you communicate with them too, and what tone of voice you use. But it goes back to the target market. And then every week in June, when we talked about internet marketing, each of our guests also reinforced that you need to know who your target market is. So we need to start there. And I know you want to tell the story, and I want to help you tell the story, but we need to really start with, who is that target market? So we're going to do that today. Next week, we're going to talk about the difference between features and benefits, and we're going to bring that together to help you figure out how to tell that story. And on July 22nd, we have Carly Minish here from Smack Dab. And Carly has a gourmet mustard company in Manitoba that's really doing great things. Her business is expanding across Western Canada, and she is a great person at telling the story. And I encourage you to check out some of the things that she does on Instagram. And she's also doing one of the things that Brent Martell shared with us on the social media session, which is she does put it on LinkedIn as well. So her customers, the retailers, also would see some of the great things that she's doing. And that's a really great tip that Brent shared with us that day. So I hope you can join us on the 22nd with Carly. And then on July 29th, we have Chef Danny Duguay with us. And Danny is doing a really interesting job of combining her world of a chef with being an influencer. And you heard us talk in June about influencers and how much they are changing how people are marketing food and beverage. And Danny's going to share some insights into how she helps food companies do that. And we did change the lineup a little bit in July. Originally, I had hoped to have Kayla Short here, who's an influencer, but unfortunately the timing, we just couldn't make it work. We tried a few different dates to try to make it work with her schedule, but unfortunately we couldn't. So we change it up a little bit, but we're going to deliver the same content. And as I say to many people this year in 2020, we have to be fluid. And that's the word we used to use often at Loblaw, which was about how to just go with the situation. And sometimes we can't control it, so we have to just go with the situation and make the best of it. And so that's what we're doing. So I'm going to do the 8th and the 15th. And then we have Carly here on the 22nd and Danny here on the 29th. So really looking forward to those weeks in July. So this is how are we going to take on this telling your story? And so what we're going to do is we're really going to focus on 4 different things. So the first thing is that target market. So today we're going to tackle that and how to help you define that target market. And then we're going to talk about needs of your customers and needs of consumers. And sometimes they overlap, sometimes they're separate. So we're going to talk about that. And then next week, as I said, we're going to do the features and benefits. We're going to talk about the difference, and we're going to really help you figure out how to pull out those benefits so that we get people to put your product on the shelf and that we get your product into the shopping cart, which is so important. And then we're going to wrap that up with getting to the point of telling your story. So that's how we're going to do this. And the first thing we have to do is really start to think about, if we're going to tell that story, who are we going to tell the story to? And the first people that I would like you to focus on are your customers. So when we define that target market, we have to think customers and consumers, and they're 2 different things. So your customers are those people who give you that purchase order, who pay you for your product. So that could be a retailer, it could be a distributor. If you are selling direct, then it is an actual person. But for most of the food industry, probably over 95% of the food industry, it is sold through a retailer or a wholesaler or a distributor or food service. So those are your customers. So I'm going to help you define that target market for your customers today. That's the first thing we're going to do. But we also know that there are people who use your products, and we have to make sure that we define them as well as part of your target market. So these are the consumers. These are the people who take your products home, share them with your family, use your products in different ways, however they're meant to be used. And they're the ones who have to pick up your product and put it in the shopping cart. And for you to be successful in food and beverage, you have to have a great definition of both customers and consumers. And that's why this is so challenging sometimes, because you see, they have a different perspective. So it's often interesting for me because we talk about the perspectives of customers and consumers, and people kind of sometimes look at me and go, well, they have the same. And I would say, no, they don't. They come at it from a different angle. So to help you see how that can really come to light, I just wanted to share a little story with you that happened to me a few years ago when we used to be able to get together for conferences before the whole COVID-19 erupted. And I was at a conference in Montreal. I was there with a client. And so we had arranged to meet for supper after the busy day on the trade show. So it's one of those days where you're busy on the trade show, you're talking to a lot of people, you're drinking a lot of water. So we said, okay, we'll run up to our rooms, quickly get changed, and then we'll meet down in the lobby and we'll head out for supper. So that sounds good. So I jump in the elevator and press my floor, whatever, 7 I think I was on, and up I go, and all of a sudden, ka-chunk, the elevator stopped. So I'm like, okay, Peter, take it easy. It's not, this has happened before, I'm sure. So I pressed the floor number again and nothing happened. The elevator didn't move. So I thought, okay, I guess what I need to do now is press that call button or alarm button or whatever it is that you see there. And so I pressed that button, and this friendly voice came on, and she said, yes, can I help you? And I said, well, I seem to be stuck in your elevator. And so she said, why are you stuck there? I said, well, I don't know. I didn't do anything. All I did was press floor 7 and it went up a bit and then it just stopped abruptly. So she said, don't worry, don't panic, don't panic. We'll send someone in to get you and be no problem. I said, okay, that's fine. And I'm not one who gets really too wound up in small spaces, so that didn't really bother me too much. But I had been drinking a lot of water during the day, and I was heading back up to my room to get changed and use the washroom. And I actually had a bottle of water with me from just that I had carried over from the trade show. So I was sort of hoping that they would get me out of the elevator relatively soon because I didn't need to use the washroom. So I'm just standing there, and so after a little while, I'm start to kind of pace around the elevator. I'm doing laps around the elevator in the little space that is there. And I'm thinking, okay, anytime now, folks. And so I hear some banging, and the woman's voice comes on the speaker again, and she says, we've sent our maintenance, and they should be there shortly, and they should be able to get you out. And I'm like, okay. And she says, is there anything you need? I said, no, I'm fine, just pacing around in here. So I continue doing laps around the elevator, and time goes by, and I hear more banging and noise, but no door opening. So she comes back on and she says, I'm really sorry, but our maintenance people can't get you out of the elevator. It seems to be stuck. So what we've had to do is call the fire department to come and get you. I'm like, the fire department? So all of a sudden I can hear sirens, and I'm like, oh, brother. So I'm still pacing, by the way, still walking around. Now I'm looking at that water bottle in a different light, because I'm thinking, then I'm like, no, you can't do that, Peter. No, just keep walking, keep walking. So I keep pacing around in the elevator, and so I hear more noise outside, and I hear a bunch of voices, and I hear more noise, and I hear, it was in Montreal where the conference was, so I hear, faites attention. And so I'm kind of looking, and all of a sudden, one of those two-headed axes comes through the door. And this fireman is there, and he's using the axe, and he pries the doors open. So all of a sudden, I'm standing there in the elevator, and there's about 6 firemen in front of me with their full gear on, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, merci, merci. But I tell you, I'm out of that elevator as quick as I can, because after about 40 minutes, I really need to find the closest washroom. So out I run, and I'm gone. And I took the stairs up to my room. And anyway, I got to meet with my client, and we had supper. But that night, we're out at one of the sort of get-togethers, the receptions that they have. And I'm telling my story about being rescued by the firemen. And there's a woman standing just behind me, and she says, look, sorry, I wasn't eavesdropping, but I did hear you telling your story about being stuck in the elevator today. And is it really true that you were rescued by 6 firemen? And I said to her, yeah, that's what happened. She said, oh, that's a fantasy I've had for years. So you see, the same thing can have a very different perspective depending on who's looking at it. So for that woman, getting rescued out of an elevator by 6 firemen was something she'd been thinking about for years. For me, I just need to use the washroom and just want to get out of the elevator. So the same situation has a very different perspective depending on who's looking at it. And that's how you have to think about customers and consumers with regards to your products. So when we're defining that target market today, you need to really be thinking about how does your customer and who's your consumer, and we're going to define them both. So let's dive into that and really try to understand what we need to do to define that. So the first thing we need to do is think about demographics. And when we talk demographics, for me, these are the quantifiable things that you can really look to on your customers and your consumers. And I think a lot of times people just think demographics for consumers, which is fine. And that's usually the more common description of it is really the demographics of consumers. But I want you to think about your customers in terms of demographics as well. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't do. They really just think about consumers. So let's talk about the customers first. So here are the things that you can use to define the demographics of your customers. So think about what format they're using. Is it a conventional store format, a discount format, mass? Is it a specialty store? Is it a warehouse? What's the format that they're using and where your products are going to be sold? Also, I want you to think about the merchandising. So is it a national procurement strategy that they're using? What sort of merchandising fixtures do they have? Do they have a style where they have big, beautiful displays, or are they really conscious about inventory? So there's lots of different things that you can think about in terms of that merchandising and how you can define that customer. And I also want you to think about the number of stores and what's the geography that they operate in. And a lot of retailers have different geographies that they operate in, and that depends on their distribution network. So you need to have that defined. And as far as distribution, what model are they using? Do they use a centralized distribution model, or are they comfortable with you using direct store delivery and bringing your product right to the store for them? And then also when it comes to distribution, what are the specs and standards that they expect? What's the format of the pallet that needs to go into them, and some of those kind of things. So those are all ways that you can define the demographics of your customers. And then also private label. So what is the penetration of private label? Because in Canadian retail, we have some retailers whose private label penetration could be as high as 35%, and others where it's maybe around 10%. And that could have a big influence on how you sell to them and what your offering is to them. So check out that space allocation on private label. And then certifications is another demographic of your customers. So what food safety certifications, what other third-party audits are they expecting? So you see, those are all quantifiable things that you can really look at for your customers. And I would always tell you that any shelf is not the right shelf. So when you're looking to define that target market for your products, sometimes we want to build the perfect retail space or food service space for your product, but other times you do have to take what you can get. So if that happens, then you need to build that profile and say, okay, this is my target market. This is the retailer who's putting my product on the shelf. So let's define the quantifiable things about them. So let's take a look at those demographics of the customer. So now let's change it up and talk consumers. So here are the demographics that you should be thinking about with consumers. So you should think about age. And that could be generation, that could be also a primary or a secondary target market for consumers. Because sometimes you do have people who are a primary target market, and then you do have a secondary that are a little bit, maybe they buy a little less often, but that could be an important part of your sales mix. So also you need to think about household size. So are these families or are these single people? What is that household size? Income, is it depending on where it is on the spectrum and what your product would appeal to? education levels. Sometimes those can be tied, sometimes they can be mutually exclusive. Education in terms of what area do they have a background in health and wellness or something like that. Geography. Again, we talk about the geography of your customers, but also the geography of your consumers. There's certain consumers who are more likely to buy who live in certain areas, and we can be very, very specific when we do social media targeting when we know where our consumers are living. And then also I put hangouts. So where do they hang out? Where do they shop? Where do they shop for food? But where do they shop for other things where you might try to do some kind of a co-marketing effort with a different industry or different sector or something like that? And where do they hang out on social media? Are they Instagram people? Are they Facebook people? Are they Pinterest people? So where can you find them and set up those kind of relationships? So you want to think about all these different demographics as you define that target market of your customers and your consumers. And one thing that we will send you, and what we're all about here at SKUFood, is trying to help make these things easier for you. So I'm going to develop a template for you to use that you can really build this process of telling your story. So I'm going to build that template, and we will send it out to all the people who registered for the session today and also for next week. So it'll have all these on there. So we'll put it on there and put it in a good format that you can use to start to build that definition of your target market. So I just wanted to take a pause and see before I move into psychographics, just to see if we have any questions about demographics, because it is a broad topic and I covered a lot of different things on there. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take a look at them now. I don't see any popping up, but I'm going to keep going into psychographics, and then if you do have any questions, by all means, enter them into that Q&A section there. So psychographics. So the way that I like to describe psychographics are really, these are the intangible characteristics. These are the ones that are much tougher to measure, and but very, very important to consider. So let's talk psychographics for your customers. And really, these can be tied to their overall business priorities. So if you look at Sobeys or Loblaw or Walmart, you can look at their overall business priorities, and they really do mention some of the things that are kind of the intangibles. So where is their focus? And I see we do have a question there, so maybe I'll just take a quick look and see. The question is about, are there any dangers or pitfalls when defining demographics? And I do think sometimes that we can be too narrow. I think that it's trying to find that right balance between narrow, where you can be focused and effective, and broad enough so that you don't maybe miss some people who might be potential customers. And the other maybe challenge that you might face would be thinking about only putting one sort of target market together. And I think when it comes to consumers, we can have different ones, and with customers, because as I would always tell you, all of these retailers operate differently. So if Sobeys are a target market for you, then you have one definition. If Costco are a target market for you, then you have a second definition, because how they operate is very different, and what you need to do to appeal to them is very different. So those would be two of the challenges or pitfalls I see is really, that finding the right flexibility when you define demographics, and then also thinking about sort of a primary, secondary, tertiary target markets. So a couple more questions here. What is the typical tool or method we can use to define the target customer, including demographics and psychographics? So I think one of the things which is a great opportunity is that interaction you have with your customers and with your consumers. And you heard Brent talk on social media a couple of weeks ago, where he said you only should be prepared to participate in social media if you're willing to make it a two-way conversation. So if you make it a two-way conversation, ask your consumers, what are they interested in? Where do they hang out? And you'll learn so much from them. So I think that's a great way. If you have the ability with your retail partners to get some purchase information, sometimes if you use some of their loyalty programs, or like Air Miles or the PC Optimum, then you can get profiles of the consumers who are buying your products through the front end. So that's another way. So there are different ways to get that kind of information that you need to help you build these definitions. But it's very important, and just watch who's buying your products. And if you're doing direct selling, you can do a great job of developing the profile. And then also if you're doing online selling, and I think Carol had mentioned this with her duckish products is that she tries to build that profile of her consumers who are buying from her online. So that's another interaction that you can use to really help you define that target market. And the last one we have right now is just how do you adapt to unexpected demographics that emerge once your products hit the market? And this is a moving target. And I'm glad you asked this question because it really is a moving target because people are changing all the time. So you have to constantly be thinking about how do you interact with them so that you can say, oh, we had sort of planned that our household income, for example, would be in this range, but now we've learned that it's actually switched over to this range over here. So how do we adapt our communication strategies? How do we adapt where we're looking for our target market with that? So it's great that you do have to keep current with it and really try to stay focused on at regular intervals going out and really sort of look into that market and really defining them. And if you have a product that's designed for a certain format, for example, on the customer side, then if it changes and all of a sudden you really have to adapt sort of maybe your case back or whatever, then sometimes you do have to do those things to appeal to them to get on the shelf. So make sure that you do stay current with it. So let's talk psychographics for a few minutes. And as I said, these are the intangibles. And a lot of times you can get these priorities from your customers. What are their priorities? So are they focused on sales? Are they, is that really their number one goal, to deliver an 8% sales increase? So that's a mindset that they're really focused on driving sales. They're going to have promotion programs to deliver those sales. They're going to merchandise aggressively to deliver sales. So what is their sales sort of mindset? And then also margin is another thing. So are they willing to sacrifice some sales to deliver a certain margin number? And those are conversations you can have. Ask them, what are they focused on? Learn about your customers. So service level is another thing. So are they really focused on in-stock position? And some retailers are more focused on in-stock position than others. And if that's the case, then you need to adjust the priorities in your business to deliver that 96% service level or whatever the target is. So really try to understand, where are they on that service level continuum? What is their expectation for your business? Is it 90% is good, 95% is good? Because that's how they'll judge you. So really try to get that sense for where they're at on service level. And quality. So are they a retailer who's focused on quality, willing to pay a premium for quality? Or do they have a certain minimum spec and they say, you just need to deliver that. That's what we're paying for you for, and that's what we expect. And that's what our consumers expect. So understand, where are they on that quality spectrum? And sustainability, which prior to COVID-19 was a huge topic, and we know it will come back. I see things in the news now about packaging and things. So it is something that's not going away, but we do need to make sure that we focus on it and understand how important it is to your retailer. And if you were selling into Sobeys and they got rid of plastic bags across Canada, that was a bold step that they took just before the whole pandemic hit. So, that shows that they're more focused on sustainability than perhaps some of the other ones. So it's about how important it is to them, and then can it be part of your strategy with them? Local products, is that something they're making space for in their stores? Are they welcoming local vendors in, or are they really running more of a national program that makes it, that's going to be geared towards one category manager in one centralized location, and that's who's going to own the shelf and that kind of thing? So what's their philosophy around that? And private label, I had under the demographics, because you can do some things like measuring their penetration in that, but I put it under psychographics as well, because private label is one of those things that, what is their philosophy? Are they committed to it? Do they see it as being an important part of their business? Do they see the private label products as their own? Or do they sort of have private label because other retailers do and they sort of think they should? So you really want to try to really understand their philosophy and see whether it's something that they're gonna spend a lot of time on, and that in every category, even a small category, that half of the shelf space is going to be devoted to private label. Because if you're the number 3 player, you're probably not going to get in, because they have sort of expectations for the amount of private label space. So those are some of the psychographics that you can define for your target market customers. Now let's talk consumers. They have psychographics, they have intangibles as well. So these are things like value. What's that relationship of price versus quality for the consumers? Are they more focused on price over here, where they really are penny pinching and you're really only going to get the product in the shopping cart if it's 89 or 99 cents? Or are they more over here on the quality spectrum and they're saying, you know what, we're willing to pay a premium if it's really good and if it's got the extra things that I want, or where are they on that value equation that we like to refer? And convenience, are they willing to pay for convenience? Are they looking for products that are 3/4 prepared for them, 100% prepared for them? Or are they the type of people who want to cook everything from scratch and make everything? So where are they out on that sort of continuance spectrum? And eating styles. So we know now that there are a lot of different eating styles out there where consumers are looking at things like, I'll say gluten-free, and we probably would have called these diets in the past, but it's really moved beyond a diet now. It's really more a style of eating. So things like Whole30 or a plant-based diet and some of those kind of things, those are eating styles. So are there certain eating styles that your target market consumers are interested in and focused on and that you can appeal to? And how, or perhaps what do you have to do to help them understand that your product does fit that eating style that they're endeavoring to follow? And then there's lifestyles. And things like lifestyle, I would put something like vegan into that, because vegan is a way of eating, but it's also a lifestyle choice. And so are your consumers fitting into that segment of the marketplace? Or are they focused on health and wellness? Are they willing to sacrifice time of preparation? So maybe they're willing to take longer to make it healthier. So things like that. And even how much do they eat at home versus food service? And we know since COVID-19 that the whole food service industry has struggled so much. We do see restaurants opening. And I know in our house that we have done a little bit of takeout in recent weeks, which we didn't do at all for a number of months. So, how much do they eat at home? How much do they prepare their meals versus how much do they go out and eat in restaurants? And just a couple of walking around numbers for you on that. In Canada, prior to COVID-19, it was about 70-30. 70% of food would have been purchased at retail, 30% through food service and institutional, whereas in the US market, it was really more like 50-50. And so that's a big difference in the marketplace. So just understand that for your consumers. What is that balance? Do they eat out? Do they eat at home? And how important are local products to them? We know that in when you ask consumers about local products, they will always tell you it's important, but are they really willing to seek them out or leave their favorite national brand for a local product? So are they willing to do that or not? And then the last thing is, what kind of flavors are they interested in? Flavors of the world? Are they adventurous? Are they willing to try new things and really go with you on a journey? Or are they more traditional and sort of what those of us here in Atlantic Canada might call meat and potatoes, kind of, where they really are into sort of more flavors or tastes that they've had for a couple of generations and they're not willing to try something new? So understand where are your target market consumers on that whole flavor thing. So those are some of the psychographic categories that you can look at. And I'm just going to again take a little pause and check out and see if we have any new questions. I don't think that I don't see any new ones here right now. But with regards to the psychographics, if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to address them. It is a different area. It's a little bit harder sometimes to grasp because it's a little tougher to put numbers to it. If you're like me, I'm probably more likely to want to have the ones where I can say, between X and Y, that's what the target market is. Where with psychographics, it's a little bit more, as I said, intangible really. So, but we do have to focus on those because often those psychographics make a big impact on people's buying decisions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in there and I will take a look at them and address them as we go. But I do want to continue on. So psychographics, and the next way that you need to define your target market, the customers and consumers, is how do they use your products? So let's just take a look at your customers, how they might use your products. Some of them might use your product to drive traffic into their store, which is really important to them. Driving traffic is a key metric for a number of retailers. So is your product a traffic builder? Some of them might use your product for image. If you have a great quality image, then they might be something they want to put up front and showcase it and say, hey, look at what we have. We've got this great quality bakery product or produce product or whatever it is that you're producing. And also sales. Are they going to use your product to deliver part of that sales number that they have to hit? And if they're responsible for driving say a 5% comparable store increase, then is your product delivering that with a 5% or greater comparable store sales increase? So is your product going to be used to deliver sales? Perhaps your product is over the category margin. So they're going to say, hey, the more we can sell that, the more we can have a positive effect on our category margin. So that's another way that you might be used, or your product might be used by your customers. And then there's that local image. A number of retailers are really focused on trying to deliver local products to consumers. So is your product going to be used for that? And if it is, then how can you support them in that? Or quality image, like if you deliver a great quality product, then you might want to showcase it together and say, hey, you'll find our great whatever at retailer ABC. So they might want to partner with you and use that to draw people into their stores. Or is your product going to be used from a variety perspective where they say, hey, look at all of the whatever we have in this category. So if it is, then again, you need to reinforce that in the messages. And when you're telling your story, you need to be able to say, hey, you know, we're really part of either the local program or the variety. We help them offer consumers more than 40 choices in this category kind of thing. And then there's the foods of the world. So are they going to be using your product to reinforce that foods of the world piece? And that's another thing that's important, is really that whole foods of the world and what image they're portraying, because consumers are looking for different products and they're really trying to find new items, interesting items. So that may be one way that your customers are using your products. And so now let's talk about consumers. So let's talk about how they might use your product. And again, this is different for every product. So you really need to figure out how to define this for your product. But I just want to put a few things out there to kind of give you that thought starter and get you thinking about it. But your product could be used as an ingredient. It could be standalone. They might use it by itself. It may be a substitute for something else. Do they buy it for a special occasion or a gift, or is it an everyday item that they use in their house 52 weeks of the year? Is it something where kids have an influence on their decision, or maybe kids use the product like cereal or something? Health and wellness, is that something that, do they see your product as being a real benefit to that health and wellness lifestyle that they are choosing to live? Perhaps it's allergies. Some people have a lot of allergy issues, and your product could be something that comes to the table that solves those problems for them, because you could say it's allergy free and it's nut free, or whatever the specific, it could be gluten, it could be whatever, but it delivers something for them. And again, when you're telling your story, it's so important to know that your product can deliver some of these things to your target market. And again, does it support certain eating programs? We hear about keto, we hear about Whole30. So if your product fits within those eating programs that people have, then you need to reinforce that and remind them of it, because they don't always remember. So you need to remind them of it. So now let's talk about how you interact with these target markets. And again, when you define these target markets, you really need to think about how you can interact with them. And customers, there's so many different ways. You can have face-to-face meetings, well, virtual meetings now, maybe face-to-face, hopefully in the near future, but probably mostly virtual meetings now. Also industry events, when we get back to being able to come together and have gatherings of people, trade shows, charity events, then that's another place where you can interact with your customers. LinkedIn, great opportunity. And Brent talked about this in his session about social media, where he referred to post your programs on LinkedIn, tell your customers what great success you're having with your consumers. And that's a great tip. And I really like that one. I think there's so much potential in that one. You also interact with your customers through phone and email and text. It blows me away that we're now text with category managers, but that seems to be the way it is. And so we have to respect that that's how they want to be communicated to. Don't forget, when it comes to your customers, that it's not just that key category manager making the decision. There are a lot of other people in that organization. Could be food safety people, could be quality people at the warehouse, could be an assistant category manager, could be somebody on the retail side. Lots of different places to interact with that customer. But remember, the category manager is the key decision maker, and that's who you really got to focus on when you're negotiating. You negotiate with the category manager, but you can build relationships throughout the entire organization. And even when you have some bad news, like a recall, that is an interaction, and they judge you on how you manage that. So make sure that you plan that, and that you deal with it professionally, and that you have turn a negative into a positive. And service level is another interaction. So how good you are at delivering what they expect when they expect it. Those things all need to be part of that definition of that target market, because when you define the target market and you say, okay, here's how we can interact, again, it helps you tell your story. Because if you're going to have a lot of focus through phone and email, then there may be some points that we need to filter into that story depending on how you're going to interact with that customer. And then consumers. There's all kinds of places for you to interact with them as well, but they're different. It's not the same as your customers. Could be mass media, it could be social media, it could be your packaging in store, it could be your website, which you heard Gail mention in our internet marketing series about how that's your #1 marketing vehicle is your website now. So what does that look like? Is it designed to resonate with that target market? And is it telling the story that you need to tell to those people so that they go, oh, when I'm in the store, I need to pick up that product and put it into my shopping cart. And again, we talked about a recall with your customers, but if you have a quality issue with a consumer that has a quality issue with one of your products, how do you interact with them, and are you really designing the right process for that to happen? And if you have a 1-800 number or a contact us email, those kind of things where, again, you can have that interaction and talk to them and figure out, learn from them, so that it goes back again to that previous question we had, which is say, how do we help define that target market? You can do that through all of this interaction that you have with your customers or with your consumers. So now let's talk about needs. And there are some needs that customers have, and there are some needs that consumers have. So as you've seen how I've gone through and really helped you try to define these two different target markets, the target market of your customers, and we talked about the demographics and the psychographics and how they're going to use your product and where you're going to interact with them. They have a certain set of needs, these customers, these retailers, wholesalers, distributors, food service establishments. They have a set of needs. And consumers, those people who pick up your product and put it in the shopping cart or order it off the menu, they have a different set of needs. So we need to think about those needs when we begin to figure out how to formulate that story. So let me just take an example, and we'll walk through an example. And let's just say that you're producing sausages, all right? And what's important to your customers is service level. They want to have, so let's say, a 95% service level. So that means that if they order 100 cases, that you deliver at least 95 cases every time. And that's something you can measure with your customer, and that's something that you need to talk to your customer about. So that's a need that your customer has, which is a certain service level number. Now, consumers, they're not worried about service level. They just expect that it's going to be in the store. But what they want is when they go to the store on Friday night and it's a really nice weekend, and in Canada, the summer is not that long, but it's long enough that you can have some nice barbecues. So they expect when they stop in the store on Friday night that that product is going to be nice and fresh for the barbecue for the weekend. Your customer defines that as service level. Your consumer defines it as, I want fresh product for the weekend so I can have a great barbecue. So that they have two different needs, and how you talk to them and how your story resonates with them, it depends on addressing the need. So your customer, you would talk about service level. To your consumers, you would say, look on Fridays, because we deliver to our stores every Thursday to ensure right through the summer, if it's going to be a sunny weekend, that we'll have fresh sausages in stock, that kind of thing. So you need to think about, when you tell your story, it's got to resonate with each one of them. So let's talk about another component of this sausage story. Let's talk about shrink. So say the average shrink in that meat department where your sausages are being sold is 5%. So what your customers are looking for is that your products will be less than that. And that means you'll be less than the category average and less than what their expectation is, and they'll be happy with you. So when you talk to your customers, you would be saying, if we sold you 100 cases of sausages, you sold at least 95 of them, so our shrink is less than 5%. That's the kind of story that your customers want to hear. But consumers don't care about that. Consumers care about just before dates. So when they go in and buy those sausages for the barbecue on Friday, maybe they want 2 or 3 weeks to use them because all of a sudden the weather forecast changed and it's going to rain on Saturday, the barbecue's canceled. They want to be able to use them the next week or the week after that or whatever it is. So they care about best before dates so that they have enough time to use the product. So again, when you're telling your story, you talk shrink to your customers, you talk best before dates to consumers. And one more, just to give you another example, is your customers, especially in sausages, they're going to have certain food safety and certification and expectations. So you need to go in and give them that comfort level that you are at least at the standard that they expect. If you're better, then that's a bonus, but you need to give them that comfort level that you're at that expectation. Consumers aren't worried about that as much. They just want safe food for their family. They don't understand all those sort of acronyms and third-party audits and HACCP and those kind of things. What they want is assurance that you are producing and processing safe food for their families. So that's the kind of language that you would want to use that's going to resonate with them when you tell your story to them. Now, there's some things that are common. So we know that consumers some people are gluten-free, and so in sausages sometimes there could be gluten to be used to bind the product together. So if you have a gluten-free one, then that's part of the story you should tell, and also to your customers, because they're looking for a line extension to offer those consumers a gluten-free product. So that's something that's common to both, and you can use the same language that's going to resonate with both. And the same with Made in Canada. Since the whole pandemic, we see an increased demand for products that are made in Canada. So it's important for you to tell that story to both your customers and your consumers. So you can see how those needs are common. So think about when you're talking about your target markets, what are the needs of your customers and what are the needs of your consumers? And that will begin to make the basis of your story. So you define that target market and then you think about the needs, what's important to each group and what's common across both. So it's really then that story can start to take shape and really resonate with people and really try to bring those things together. And again, we're going to talk features and benefits next week, but you can see that these things lead you more to the benefits of the product. If you want to think about having that fresh barbecue, fresh sausages for your product, your family for the weekend, then that's about the benefit to them. It's not that you have a best before date of 3 weeks. It's that you're going to have fresh product for them, for their family, for their barbecue, for the weekend. So, but next week we're going to talk more about that, but it is based on these different needs of customers and consumers. So I've covered a lot of ground here, and I've been going through it fairly quickly, and I wanted to really try to give you that framework. And as I said, we will provide a template for you so that you can dive into this with your own products and really try to build that definition of the target market, customers and consumers for your own business. So every week, one of the things since we started doing our recipes for success, which believe it or not started back in March and now we're into July, I always really try to share some good news. But before I do that, I'm just going to check and see if we've got any more questions. As I said, I did cover a lot there. I talked about the demographics. I talked about the psychographics. I talked about how the target markets are going to use your product. And then we also talked about the needs of both customers and consumers. So all those 4 components really help you build that definition of the target market. So I'm not seeing any more questions right now, but if you do have one, by all means, type it into that Q&A and I'd be happy to address that for you. So when it comes to some good news, there were some stories that I was able to find again this week, and the first one is about Nova Scotia businesses that delivered thousands of sandwiches. And so it's interesting how this idea started, and it was started by the people at Julian's Bakery in Chester, Nova Scotia, which is a well-known quality bakery company that delivers into Halifax as well. And apparently they had an idea because somebody said to them, you know what, I'm working at home. I don't need my lunch money. I don't need my parking money. So why don't you take that money and produce some sandwiches for those who are in need? And that simple idea led to 3 months later that Julian's Bakery has delivered thousands of sandwiches and sweets to food banks and service organizations. And while at the same time, they were able to provide work for their staff and support local producers. So it's a good news story all the way around. They were able to keep their people working. They were able to keep buying products from their suppliers and keep their people working, and also deliver sandwiches in need. And Laura Mulrooney, the owner of Julian's Bakery, was the person who was sort of behind Give Us Your Lunch Money. And they also teamed up with The Other Bean in Halifax and Chester's Cafe in Chester. And they delivered over 5,000 sandwiches and 7,000 sweets to organizations all the way from Halifax to Bridgewater. So congratulations to them for doing that and really doing a good thing. And, you know, as I say every week, I'm incredibly impressed about how our food industry has really stepped up during this whole pandemic. And I think that the food industry has shined over and above other sectors who could have stepped up better. So congratulations. Another one that I was able to find about McDonald's. So McDonald's in May did their Fries for Good, which was a nationwide initiative to support COVID-19 relief efforts. So for a week, McDonald's donated a portion of the proceeds from all fries sold in Canada to the Canadian Red Cross to support emergencies and COVID-19 response funds. So we know that food service was hit exceptionally hard, and we know French fries, we hear the stories about potatoes, but McDonald's definitely did step up and donated some of the proceeds from their fries to COVID-19 relief efforts. And the final good news story that I have this week is from Pusateri's. And if any of you remember, Pusateri's did actually kind of get some bad press when the whole pandemic started, because somebody took a picture of some Lysol wipes in their store at a really, really inflated price. And the Premier of Ontario kind of went on a bit of a rant about that, and which I think probably stopped sort of anybody who was thinking of trying to change prices and try to benefit too much from the whole pandemic and gouging people for a product. But I think Pusateri's, you know, they did change their strategies, and one thing that they did was they have donated, and they're letting food banks in Toronto know about their Feeding Our City initiative, where they now have 15,000 meals which are available and donated to food bank organizations across the GTA. And even in April, when they launched their what they called Feeding Our Heroes initiative, they were committed to donate meals to frontline healthcare workers, and they had an overwhelming response and delivered over 10,000 meals which they donated to essential workers. So congratulations to them. You know, I think that's really stepping up. And if any of you have ever had the opportunity to be in a Pusateri's store, they're great specialty stores in Toronto. And I think for healthcare workers, it would have been a treat to have a meal that would have been prepared in their prepared foods section. So, so I do see we have a couple more questions here, which I'll take a look at here before we wrap things up for today. So somebody's looking forward to getting the templates, so that's great. And it said that they're confirming what they want to do. So that's great. I'm really happy, and that's exciting for me to hear that it meshes with what you see as being important in your business, and that we're excited at SKUFood that we can provide that framework to help you define that target market. So the last question was, can you give some suggestions on how to determine your target market for an original product, meaning a product that is not currently in market, so it's tough to measure off what is already out there? So I'm going to say a product that's in development, that kind of thing. So one thing, you can look for some, you know, who you would define as your competition. And I do know it continues to amaze me that in the food industry, we continue to see new products get introduced and launched. Just when you think you've seen everything, you go, wow, look at that, a whole new thing. So it could be that you're working on something that is unique and doesn't have any competition. But first I'll address it from the competitive point of view. So take a look at the competition, and you can look a lot about what they're doing on social media or in mass media or in-store programs. What's their packaging say, that kind of thing. Who is it talking to? And you have to make the decision, are they doing a great job? They may not be doing a great job. So I'm not suggesting you copy it, but I am suggesting that you take a look at it and see what you can learn from it. Now, another way to do that is sometimes if you have some small amounts of product where you want to take it out to a target market that you've sort of said, okay, this product this is why we're doing this. We're creating this product to solve this problem that somebody might have, or we're creating this product that has these benefits that's going to resonate with this type of person or this type of family or that kind of thing. So you can, maybe if you can produce some small amounts, you could get it into the hands of those people and really get some great feedback from them and learn about, you know, what are some of the characteristics that they have either in their household or how they're eating or some of those kind of things. So you could do that with the sort of a small sample size. And I know one processor that I've done some work with where they were taking product to a certain partner in their business, and they're not a food supplier, they're a partner on the financial side, but they were asking their staff for input and that kind of thing, which I think they got some great feedback and learned what type of people really like their products and what type of people were like, well, you know, it's okay, it's good, but it's not my favorite kind of thing. So it's important to learn about who doesn't like it as much as it is to learn about who likes it. So you could try to do something like that with kind of a little bit of a test market, that kind of thing. There are the traditional forms of market research you could use, like telephone or online surveys and some of those kind of things, but they're a little tougher to really make definitive decisions about. And one thing I would tell you about when you are working to define your target market, whether it's customers or consumers, you know your products. So you should have a great idea about who is going to buy them and why they're going to buy them and how they're going to use them. So you really got to use that intuition that you have as well. You want to have a great combination of the facts, which you can get through either purchase behavior or test markets or surveys and that kind of thing. But also you want to say, you know, who do I really think is buying that, and begin with that and then see if that is the truth. Don't just assume that you know. But if you need to create that for a new product that's not in the market yet, but then you need to test it as soon as you have some product that you can then share with those people. So, so lots of different ways that you can try to do that. And I don't see any more questions in the Q&A there. So I want to really say thank you for being here with us for another one of our SKUFood Recipes for Success, which are presented by FCC. I know people are busy during these times as things are becoming more open, so appreciate you being here with us and really hope that you're able to join us again next week for the sort of the next segment of Telling Your Story, where we're going to talk about features and benefits, and then we'll wrap it up between that sort of the definition of the target market, the needs, the features and benefits to help you figure out how to tell your story. And if you're interested in some help, or you want to ask me some questions about it with regards to your products, I'm always happy to have a conversation about the food industry. Always enjoy hearing about people's different products and what they're doing. So I really hope that this has been a great benefit to you as you are working on that story. And take a look at how you're telling your story. It's something that you can't take for granted. And in this environment that we're working on, where people are making lists before they go to the store, they're not shopping the store the same way they used to, or perhaps they're shopping online where they're making a grocery order and they're putting it into the retailer's online ordering portal. So you need to be on that list before they go to the store. And that's why telling your story is so important. So we really look forward to seeing you here again next week. And thanks for spending your afternoon with us.